I've been told that this final update of this disclosure plan is very clever and will surprise everyone, and it's very cleverly done. Thorhan said to me, "This is genius." That's this. So I wait always to make a judgment of what I see in this story, but also because what's important now, it's to take it step by step to the public. ETs are real. That's the first step. And that's a big thing. ETs are real and they have been here for a long time and have worked with our governments. And that's the first tough part. And this is happening whether some people like Stephen Greer will say all the ETs are positive, whether someone like David Grush will say all the ETs are a threat, they are negative. I would say doesn't matter for the moment. What matters is that these different narratives blend in with the different current of thoughts, and it just goes through. It goes through the gate to the people's mind. Whatever they think about aliens, it goes through their mind and they realize, wow, aliens exist, it's real. They've been here and they've worked with our governments. Oh, wow. But then, once the mentalities of the collective unconscious of humanity has realized that and it's assimilated, then we can pass to the next step, contact.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, I'm very happy to have Elena Danaan here in the studio of Exopolitics Today. So welcome, Elena.
Thank you, Michael. I'm very glad to be here. This is good fun. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm really looking forward to being able to ask you some questions in person about some of these topics that I know we've been looking at for the last few years, and I've been able to interview you a few times, and we've talked on the phone, but this is the first time we get to actually ask questions in person, so it's very important. So I want to just begin with the relationship you have with Ea or Enki, and how important that is to understand our ancient history as a civilization.
Well, Ea contacted me in 2021 well, it was the first contact, and he started to give me information about our true history, the true history of the Earth. It turned out that I discovered and I learned that there was a reason why I was calling him an old friend, because I knew him from previous lives, so this was something easy to feel comfortable with him very, very quickly. Although he is very impressive, he's very tall, and he has an energy field, a frequency field that is so powerful that in my third density body, when I go and meet him physically, I cannot approach him. It's quite difficult. It's so powerful. Oh, Ea is an alchemist. He calls himself a cosmic alchemist. He developed his knowledge to such a point that he became immortal. And this is something that we can talk about. It's the Anunnaki have different grades in their society, different castes. I wouldn't say caste in the sense of conflicting with each other. I would say like a society or organization. And the higher class of the Anunnaki society, the royals, as I can say, they have this ability to access the immortality of the flesh if they want so. So that's what Ea decided to do. For certain reasons, he decided to undergo the journey to reach out through alchemical transmutation, immortality of the flesh. That means that his body now is stable, he won't decay. And this allows him to preserve his knowledge, but also access higher realms of consciousness, higher realms of understanding, and connect directly with source. We can all connect with source because we are all fractal of it, but what he can do is actually manipulate and use the very substance of source. He can tap into it and create himself using the source material. That's why he's so powerful. And I think that we have a tremendous advantage and gift to know more about his wisdom. His wisdom is amazing. Sometimes he says words to me, and days after, I discovered that there was a secret meaning behind these words. His wisdom goes beyond what we could expect. He's amazing. So I meet him physically. I'm meeting him physically. It's not channeling, it's not download, I'm actually traveling into space to meet him on board a ship. I meet him on his ship, on the Nibiru ship, which is an incredible place. So that's...
Do you want to tell us about the Nibiru ship? Because the way you described it to me, it was almost like a caste system, or there was a very clear differentiation between the scientists, the crew, the pilots, and the royals.
Yes.
So if you want to tell us.
I was very impressed, and it was the first time that I was confronted to such an organization in a society, because usually when I visit some motherships where there are certain type of people or culture, or when I go to Ganymede, for instance, there are the Ginvo, or there are other people, they have it's uniformity in their standards. For the Anunnaki, it's different, because there are, I would say, two speeds. There are the people like us who live their lives very long. They can prolongate their life using monoatomic gold, and when they feel their body is tired enough, they clone themselves. They can clone themselves and transfer their consciousness, but they will undergo the cycle of reincarnation, of course, but they will never be able to do what the royals can do, because they are a specific type of bloodline. The royals can access this immortality, and because they can access this immortality, they live out of time. So on the Nibiru ship, the royal quarters where Ea lives, it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's Baroque architecture. You would think you enter like in an Indian temple. Like, there are rivers. I saw a river running through it. Gardens, beautiful gardens. The fragrances are amazing, with plants I've never seen anywhere else, mixed with a beautiful, extravagant architecture. Everything is sculpted. There's nothing blank. There's no surface blank. And there are gardens. And besides that, when you get out of the royals' quarter, you get into the other habitat of the ship for the crew, for instance. So you have the crew, or the military or the scientists, and the normal people. And it's total different world. It's very futuristic, very, very futuristic architecture, and very advanced technology, extremely advanced technology. And people wear uniforms. It's like a bit being on the ship of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, but a higher level. And the discrepancy of world of architecture, of ambience, is quite impressive, really impressive.
So the lives of the crew on the Nibiru, are we talking about people that are kind of very similar to like extraterrestrials that are part of the Galactic Federation, as opposed to the royals that live for tens of or even hundreds of thousands of years?
Yes, they are all Anunnaki. In fact, they call themselves Anahim. The Anahim, or Anunnaki, if you will, they are a compound of different species, different races. It's a galactic culture from their own galaxy, their own world. And they have, you can find humans, reptilians, gray type, and other species. But something in common that they have, I noticed, is that whatever their species or their race, they have this elongated skull, a little more or less elongated. So I think it's a common trait in their galaxy. And that was interesting. Yeah.
So now when the Anunnaki came to Earth and they established a presence, now the Anunnaki on the Nibiru, what they did was they created avatar bodies to transfer their consciousness. So when the Anunnaki came, I mean, how much time did they actually spend in their real physical bodies on Earth as opposed to like transferring their consciousness into an avatar?
Well, I do not know exactly the time, but they first came on Earth in their spacesuit. They are described even like fish people because they were wearing shiny clothes, their spacesuit, I suppose, environmental suit. I know it didn't take long. I don't know how long, but it didn't take long for them to create bodysuits, environmental suits, which are bodies in which they can transfer their consciousness, because the conditions of radiation, gravity, electromagnetism, they cannot live in that. They cannot take it. It's so different from where they come from. In all their ships, it's really very well regulated with certain conditions, and so they needed to, as they were going to live on Earth and create colonies, it was a long-term stay. So then they decided an easy way, which was creating avatar bodies.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that there's a connection between the Anunnaki, as described in the Sumerian cuneiform texts, and the gods, the Olympian gods, and of course the Roman, Latin gods. So, my question is, if we think of Zeus as the sky god in the Greek pantheon, and we think of Poseidon as the god of the water in the Greek pantheon, are we talking about these two brothers, Enlil and Enki?
Exactly, Michael, exactly. Zeus was the thunder god, and he was the god of the sky, the master of the sky, the leader of all the gods. Mm-hmm. He loved to play with humans, and it said that the Greek gods had a board game, and they were playing the humans, fighting each other, And it's exactly what Yahweh did, aka Enlil. Sorry. Enlil is the thunder god. And in other traditions, for instance, in the Yazidi traditions, where I was to northern Mesopotamia recently, and to them, the thunder god is the god who destroyed the earth and created the flood. and it's Enlil. So Zeus as Enlil, which is very obvious, and Enki as Poseidon, it absolutely fits. And Enki, had his residence in Atlantis. So he always came from the sea. When he came to, first he lived in Eridu with the others, and then they split. They built their places, and Enki went to Atlantis, and there was already a kind of a civilization there, but not very well developed. So he developed it, and it was his home on Earth. And he always had this. Is represented with a trident. Well, this is actually a weapon. And I've seen it. Because Ea, Enki, we say Ea, is a collector. He collects antiques, and he has all these ancient weapons, which is extraordinary. Yes, he was Poseidon. Oannes. Yes, that was him.
So Enki, it was Poseidon.
Yes.
Enlil was Zeus,
Yes.
the thunder god, and Poseidon was regarded as the kind of founder or the protector of Atlantis. And of course, we know Atlantis ended in a terrible way. And I think you have some interesting information about the role of Enlil or Zeus in terms of ending Atlantis. So what do you know about that?
Yes, as we are in the Greek mythology, we can go back to what Plato said about Atlantis. He said that the gods, the council of the gods, were not happy with Atlantis and what was going on there, so they decided to destroy it. And in destroying it, they caused a flood to the rest of the planet. So that's one thing. And this particular aspect, the god of the gods, or the thunder god, or the god of the sky, wasn't happy, was angry at humans, and decided to destroy them, to reset everything to ground zero. This is common to many traditions. Mesopotamia, of course. We have other traditions. So we know that Enlil and Enki, half brothers, were not getting on well together, because Enlil was on a personal mission, which was he wanted to create his own empire using Earth. Earth to him was the groundwork to create his own empire. And he developed slavery on Earth. He wanted to enslave the most people as possible. And he had put in charge his geneticist, his scientist. And Ea was at the head of them, to try to get these humans to, these first humans, to be formed as slaves, altered as their DNA, and make them docile and compliant. Ea wasn't okay with that, but Enlil was the master of this expedition, and so he was in control. And he said, okay, Ea said, okay, let's see what's going on. And he discovered who were these humans, that they were already the product of another experiment. So to go back to Atlantis, Ea decided to protect the humans, not to enslave them, and try to free them from slavery. And from Atlantis, where he created his own bubble of protection, he was trying to get this work done. The thing is, Enlil was trying everywhere possible to get rid of Ea, Enki. And he couldn't destroy Atlantis because it was well protected, and there were other ETs there. There were the Alteans. There were other colonies as well. And it was so protected, you couldn't attack it. So what Enlil did was, because Enlil was half reptilian and had a reptilian mind, and he welcomed the Sikaar as well on Earth. So Enlil decided to collapse the Atlantean society from the inside. And that's typical what the reptilians have been doing until now, collapsing societies from the inside, creating groups that are creating division and groups that are going to argue and fight against each other. But what Enlil did, he really wanted to collapse the center of Atlantis, because Atlantis was structured as such. There was Atla, the citadel, and the citadel was home to, of course, Ea and the Alteans and this class of scientists who were working together. And there were all the power supplies, the pyramid, the generators, all the knowledge was in Atla, in the citadel, central citadel. And that was unreachable. So, and around you had colonies. So it was very mixed, these colonies. So what Enlil managed to do, because the colonies, you could trade with them, they were open. So he infiltrated and he sent his people to infiltrate the colonies and mount the colonies against Atla, the citadel. And the narrative was, look at them, they consider themselves as an elite and they retain the knowledge from you. You have right to this knowledge. You are entitled to use their knowledge, their genetics, sciences, their power technologies, their weapons. You are entitled. And that was it. So they were mounting the people against the citadel, and until riots occurred, and there were moments where the citadel was invaded by infiltrated, and it's been going on for a long while. So what Ea decided was, okay, they're coming for it. It's not going to get better. We are going to hide this knowledge. I'm going to start to hide this knowledge and take it away from Atlantis and put it in different places in the world. And we will mark these places. And that's what they did. Well, the colonies got their hands on some of the genetic technology, the holographic table, all the devices, they got their hands on that. And they brought it in the colonies. They started to, fired by power, just influence, so much. They started to do genetic experiments to create creatures that would be able to take over the Alteans and the Anunnaki, the faction of Ea in the citadel, and all the scientists, and just storming it. So they were playing with genetics, not really having the knowledge. They were doing chaotic stuff. It was terrible. And this was getting worse and worse. They were creating creatures, like a bit, they were trying to probably make super soldiers at the time, And that's when all went wrong. And my point is, when you think about the people, there's a lot of people who remember having lived in Atlantis, a lot. And you discover that there are two stories. People who remember the Atlanteans being in a part of Atlantis where it was extremely spiritual, beautiful, people working with crystals, being very spiritual. It was beauty, science, peace, wisdom. And other people remember the riots, the genetic experiments, the conflicts. So it's because it was in the colonies, not in the citadel. So I'm glad to bring this clarity. But I had the conversation today, and you told me about the correspondence with Earth colonies, or the modern colonies of our era, how it works. So you remember what you said?
Yeah, sure. That's a kind of really interesting point, that where you have modern day or recent modern history about these different colonies that were set up. I know, for example, in Australia, the Australian history, the British Empire, especially London, the Parliament, the laws coming from the Parliament were very humane and ethical in terms of how to treat Indigenous peoples. But the colonists themselves were quite ruthless. And for example, the colonists wiped out the Tasmanian Aborigine. I mean, every last Aborigine in the current state of Tasmania was wiped out. They were considered non-human or less than human by the colonists. And so they took it upon themselves to just eradicate what they considered to be less than human. And certainly other Aborigines in other areas of Australia were treated pretty poorly, even though the British Empire had various policies on how to treat Indigenous peoples. And we see the same thing in the Americas, where the Native Americans, like the Cherokee and the other tribes from the eastern states, signed agreements with the Crown prior to the independence. And the Crown recognized that the Indian nations had a right to the land. And so they said that they would recognize that right and protect it. Now, once you had the War of Independence and America then became free and independent, eventually that treaty with the British was replaced by treaties that were then broken by the colonists, or, well, of course, the American government. So, another example of how colonists behave much more aggressively, less ethically than the kind of center of political power. So I totally understand how in the final days of Atlantis, how you had the center kind of like behaving and doing things in an ethical way, but the colonies, the far-flung colonies especially, would have been, as you said, kind of like rabid. So that's very important. So so I would agree that the colonists, the colonies would have been much more violent, much more an example of Atlantis not working.
Yes. Makes so much sense. Yes, I'm glad you explained this. Yes,
Yeah.
interesting.
So now let's move forward a little bit to the making of the kind of like Hebrew and then the Christian and then the Islamic religions, and they're all predicated on Abraham, this patriarch that left the city of Ur, an ancient Sumerian city that at that time of Abraham was, I believe that was part of the Akkadian or maybe the Assyrian Empire. So Abraham leaves Ur, taking with him his family and the records, the history of Ur. And up until around the 7th century, the Hebrews actually had recognized the Elohim, and they recognized multiple Elohim, and Yahweh was just one amongst a number of them. And he wasn't by any means the only one, nor the most loved one. I just did an interview recently with Paul Wallace in his book, the Eden Conspiracy. He describes how Asherah was a female deity that was worshipped by the ancient Hebrews. She was worshipped, but then around 600 BC, the Hebrews got together and decided to revise out of the Hebrew texts or the recognized canon all mention of Asherah and the other Elohim, and just focus on Yahweh as the one and only God. And so, to me, Yahweh was just one amongst many gods. So, I mean, who was he? Was he just a ruthless Anunnaki do you want to explain who was Yahweh?
Yeah. Yahweh was Enlil. Yahweh was Enlil. And he wanted to play with humans and rule this world. He was cruel. He was a cruel, evil person. All he wanted to he was sadistic. He wanted to play with humans and torture them. And this evil entity was Enlil. It was Enlil. The Elohim, or the Anachim, it's another word for them, which is the Anunnaki. They were many on Earth, and there was a group of them who were in charge and were fighting against each other for custody of territories. The territorial wars were going on all the time. So you had Enlil playing Yahweh, and others as well playing other gods. Marduk played Satan, and Ninurta, Enlil's son, played Allah. And there is always something that has caught my attention in the Islamic religion. I would be burned for saying that in other times. There is no a greater God than Allah, and He's the greatest among all gods. I mean, you mean that there are other gods? You know what I mean? Okay. And that's so they played, and sometimes they were swapping. They were swapping games. Yahweh and Enlil and Marduk were playing so much power games. So that's who they are, who they were.
Okay, well, that's very, very interesting. I know that this is something that historically can be shown, that the Hebrews did transition from a polytheistic religion to a monotheistic one with this total focus on Yahweh as the one and only God. Now, if we move forward to Yeshua or Jesus, he quite well, let's just say that there are Christian texts that show that, and actually even in the current Bible, there are passages that refer to Yeshua not acknowledging Yahweh as his God. And certainly the Gnostic Christians, according to them, Jesus believed in another God.
Yes.
Rather than Yahweh. So, what happened there with Jesus and the God he prayed to, and Yahweh of the Old Testament?
Yes, what happened is that the good faction of the Anunnaki weren't happy with Yahweh, Enlil having too much power, and so they sent Yeshua, who was a hybrid, a descendant of this bloodline, to try to get people to open their eyes on who was this evil entity. And it was not a God of love, of truth, of compassion at all. And the message of Yeshua was the connection with God, the kingdom of God, you have it inside of you. And you can connect directly with God by yourself. And he was giving the people their sovereignty. And he said, that's an important scripture that says in the Old Testament, that's the New Testament, sorry, that says that Yeshua went to see the priests of Yahweh, and he said, your father is not my father. And he was making the point with that. That's why the priests of Yahweh wanted to get rid of Yeshua. And Yeshua was, interestingly, speaking of his own father. So I understand that sometimes he was speaking about his genetic father, the father who created the bloodline of the patriarchs, Aka, Enki. And sometimes he was talking of the father in terms of source creator, that with with which we are all connected. And there's something that is very important, is that when we read in the ancient scripture that we are made at the image of God, it's not the body, it's the soul. We are a fractal of source consciousness. And because we are a fractal of source consciousness, we have a bit of it in us. And we can connect, could be by quantum entanglement, we have the connection directly to Creator Source. We can tap into this infinite knowledge just by meditating and connecting with our own soul, finding the core essence of our soul. And then we have the connection with Source, with God. And that's what Ia is teaching as well. I'm seeing him regularly, and he says all these things, that we need no priest, we need no church, no religion. He said the same thing as Yeshua was saying. It's exactly the same words. He said, you have the connection. If you go within, you can connect with Creator, everyone in the universe. And he's been fighting in the past to get everyone to understand this and get out of slavery, because that's what he wanted. Humanity to get away and out of this slavery inflicted by Enlil.
So then we have this kind of historical understanding of how the Hebrew tradition kind of like changed from a polytheistic approach to the divine, to understanding life where you had different gods, different deities that were worshipped, that were part of their way of kind of like accessing source energy, if you like, to one where there was this kind of growth in monotheistic faith systems. And of course, Yahweh was like a pretender, really.
Yes.
He was a pretender. And those that challenged that, like Yeshua, Jesus, were excluded. And we know that the Gnostics were persecuted very badly, especially once Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, that kind of monotheistic faith system became dominant. So now we have this kind of return of Enki, and you've been talking about that, and not just you've been talking about that since 2021 that he returned. So what does that mean? The return of Enki Ea. What does that mean for us today?
It means that we are free from the slavery. We are free from the millennia of enslavement that Enlil had set up on Earth. He is back because the chains have been broken. This religion, what Enlil or Yahweh had constructed, it was a whole power system of control of humanity. He created him and his team, his followers, the deep state. He is at the origin of it. To continue his work. It hasn't changed since the time of the expedition, when Enlil managed to enslave most of a lot of the population on Earth. Not everyone, but in these areas a lot. And it had spread out to the whole world in our modern times, until recently, when Enlil was expelled from Earth and all the regressives. But until now, he's at the origin of the deep state, of the Illuminati. The Illuminati are the products of Enlil. And the big religious institution in Rome that we know about, I don't know if it's sensible to name it, but yes, that's all power control. And the return of Ea is the return. You know, people have been saying, oh, Jesus will return. Jesus is going to return. Well, my understanding of it, and to me it's blowing my mind with evidence, it's that it's not Jesus the soul, the person, the character. It's not him as a person or soul. It's what we call the Christ consciousness. It's he started it. It's the philosophy, the spirituality of regaining our human sovereignty, of re-empowering ourselves, unlocking our potential, and starting to vibrate to our right frequency, where we should have been from the start. Ea comes back with this gift. And I think when people say the return of Yeshua, it's not Yeshua, it's what his teachings, what he represents. And Yeshua is anyway the descendant. He has the bloodline of Ea. So it's in a way his return, not him, but the bloodline, the original Adamic DNA returns. Ea offered, gave back the key of the original Adamic DNA to the earth, to the humans of earth, to the Earth Alliance. And as I explained, it's now implemented in the medbeds if you choose it, if you want to repair some genetic problems that you have, you can use this. But anyways, that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Ea returned 2021, and there is some kind of element of that return which is consistent with prophecy.
Yes.
And I mean, we're not just talking about the return of Jesus, there's also the return of Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, and Kalki. I mean, many traditions. Yeah. And so, we could go in many directions there. But I want to kind of like get to another aspect of the return of Ea, Enki, which is this transition in terms of custodianship of our solar system. Yes. That our solar system has gone from one that was controlled by the Draconians and the Orions to one where now humanity is in charge of the future of our solar system. And Enki, Ea has, together with other extraterrestrial groups, has kind of like overseen that transition. So why is that? Why did they do that? Why did the extraterrestrials, different councils, the Federation, Galactic Federation, and Ea, why did they choose to transfer custodianship of the solar system from the Greys, the Draco, to the Earth Alliance?
Well, the star system was in the custody of the old empire, the Anunnaki Empire or Anunnaki Empire. And the two main outposts were Earth and the planet Saturn. Nobody could approach Saturn. I remember before all of this happened, when I was flying with Thoran, we had to avoid Saturn, not pass inside of the rings. And he wouldn't tell me. He said, no, it belongs to someone else and we must not infringe the territory. Okay. And it was, in fact, Anunnaki concession. And on the Saturn there was a lot of technology, and it was Marduk who was in custody of Saturn. Earth was still in the custody of Enlil, but that's something very deep. We're touching now the galactic diplomacy, because Enlil, okay, he's an Anunnaki, but he's also half Sikaar. Because his father, Anu, the head of the empire in this galaxy, married a Sikaar queen, a reptilian queen. At the time, she lived in Orion, and she had a lot of possessions. And it was a deal where their offspring would have to inherit of the empire, the Anunnaki Empire, and in exchange, Anu would have all the territories, could rule over all her territories. Anu said yes, and he regretted it, I've been told. So when Enlil came to Earth, he brought with him the Sicars. Not with the expedition, but later on, he allowed them to come in. So when we talk about all these reptilian royal bloodline who have caused a lot of mayhem on Earth, we say, but are they Anunnaki? Are they Sicars? Because sometimes we would think this, and they are both. They are both. They have the Sicars and the royal house of Anu's blood. And that's why they marry among each other, and they are very eager to live long and maintain their lifespan long by some products that they with unspeakable things. Anyways, once the Sicars were removed from the star system by the Earth Alliance and the Galactic Federation of Worlds, once the Greys were also removed, then Enlil was in a weak position. As long as the Sicars were there, Anu couldn't do anything. Nobody couldn't do anything. There needed to be an inside job to get rid of the Sicars first. Then, the Sicар Empire could not come and protect Earth possession. So that was it. Once the Sicars were expelled, the key point was Antarctica. The key point was Antarctica when the Dark Fleet was expelled from Antarctica. That was a moment when everything else unfolded. Mars was liberated, the Dark Fleet went out of the star system with all the Dracos. And that was it. And that was the start of serious cleaning now. And the undergrounds were still in the process of being cleansed. They have been evacuated since. And then, well, who do we see arriving? The Intergalactic Confederation. Well, first Ea in September 2021. Then in October, the Intergalactic Confederation, Cedars. Because now we could talk. We had solved the Sicar problem, so we could do the cleaning inside as we wanted, and the Nibiru were gone as well. That's when Ea came back, and Ea gave back. Well, Enlil was removed, of course, and Marduk. Ninota as well, he was gone, I think, at that point. So the next step, when Enlil was arrested and the Sicars were destitute from their power in this star system, the Intergalactic Confederation with Ea, they organized a council to get Anu to come and make a decree and just remove Enlil. And once this council was done, Ea was the heir of the Anunnaki Empire because Enlil had been arrested. He wasn't the heir anymore. And Anu had enough with this. He was relieved. Ea is now the heir of the Anunnaki Empire. So he has a right. And Ea, with the agreement of his father, decided, because he suddenly was in custody of Saturn and of Earth, again, Enki, the title he had bore for a little while, he gave it back to the people of Earth. He gave Saturn back to the Earth Alliance, and also Earth was free. He said, oh, no, Earth, it's yours. And because all you ever wanted is to see humanity of Earth free, sovereign, and blossoming, So there has been meetings where Ea passed on the custody of Saturn in the hands of the Earth Alliance. Why? Because it's the more prominent indigenous civilization in the star system. So because we, as humans of Earth, are the most advanced indigenous civilization to this star system, we have the custody of it as protectors. So that's what happened.
Now, I know there's a lot of people that don't believe the Earth has been liberated, that there are still negative extraterrestrials here. So what was the critical factor that led to this liberation where the Draconians and the Orion Greys had to leave our solar system? I thought it was because the arrival of the Intergalactic Confederation that that represented this kind of like 24 founder races, seeder races that had set up the genetic experiments, and that they left because they did not want to be seen or recorded. Kind of like in a way, I think that this goes back to our earlier question about the colonies and the center. That the reptilians that were in charge of our solar system were kind of like part of this far-flung Draconian Empire, and they were behaving in ways that would be embarrassing to the center of the Draconian Empire. So when the Intergalactics arrived, that these Draconians, they knew that the Intergalactic Confederation were going to be viewing everything, and we're being bombarded with orbs and probes all over the place, recording everything. So was that really why they decided to just pack up and leave? It wasn't because there was an overwhelming force that was defeating them militarily, but it was because they didn't want to be seen and recorded by these extraterrestrial superior or advanced extraterrestrial fleets arriving that were going to be recording everything.
Oh, the Seekers fear the Intergalactic Confederation because the Seeders are more powerful and more advanced, way more advanced than them. So the fight started with, really took a good turn with Antarctica, and then everything just took off. Mars, everything. The arrival of the Intergalactic Confederation allowed the resolution of all this clearing. All the resistance, especially on Earth in the underground, they said, okay, we're done. But the thing is, with the Seekers, is that they have honor. You can imagine the Klingon in Star Trek. That's the Seekers. They have honor. And I know that the Seekers who have been expelled from the star system are considered as losers, both by the Seeker Empire and both by the Dark Fleet, which is a special organization involving Seekers. That's the question of honor. You've lost the star system, you're a loser, you're not going back to the headquarters. So the Dark Fleet headquarters are in Aldebaran star system, Aldebaran, in the Taurus constellation, and the Seeker Empire headquarters are in Alpha Draconis star system. There was still before the Seeders arrived. It was the end of the fights. There was resistance. There was the end of the fights. But the frequency of these 500 motherships of this very advanced civilization, it was like a shockwave, a frequency shockwave. And anything that was still resisting just was gone. They were gone. They just had to be there, and that settled everything. That was it. And when their frequency arrived, entered our solar system through the Jupiter Stargate, the shockwave of frequency activated all the technology that they had left long time ago before they left. The arcs, for instance, and all the star seed, all the envoys who are members of the cedar races who are incarnated here felt it as well and suddenly remembered who they were at that very moment when they entered the star system, the cedars. That was it. Like when you throw a stone in the water. That was it.
Well, I know that one of the key events that you've described is when you had the Jupiter Accords, where there was this agreement where the United States Space Command was recognized to be the point organization for representing humanity, our space programs, in dealings with these different extraterrestrial civilizations, the Federation, Andromeda Council, and so forth. And General Dickinson, James Dickinson, is the head of Space Command. So he has that kind of tremendous authority. Now, more recently, you've described this encounter in January of 2023 at Raven Rock in Pennsylvania, where you had General Glenn Van Herk. You recognized him or identified him, and he was handed a disclosure plan that presumably would be put into effect by Northern Command and NORAD, that he was in charge of those two organizations. So here you have two powerful military officials. And recently, in an unprecedented move, there was General Van Herk was criticizing Space Command for overstepping its responsibilities or authority when it came to space and tracking Santa Claus. So, yeah, what do you make of that?
Oh, that was so interesting. I believe it has nothing to do with extraterrestrials or with disclosure. Because what I see is, maybe I'm wrong, but that's my vision. People will make of it what they think. So I'm sharing here only my vision, not intelligence. My vision and my understanding personally is that there's a power struggle, a human power struggle, as simple as that. ETs have their plans and agendas to liberate Earth and get the disclosure going. That's a thing. But then the humans do human things. So how I see it is that, okay, General Dickinson was on Jupiter and was put in charge of the new Earth Starfleet, say. That was power and big role. And then the update of the disclosure plan is given to the head of the NORAD, General Van Herk, for tactical reasons, and I suppose that it's a good reason, not, different people leading different sectors of this. And I think, to me, it's just a question of power. You were given the to be at the head of the agreements that happen on Jupiter, but I was given the disclosure plan, and don't step on my, my territory. And I think that's just what it is. I think that's just what it is, and there's nothing to worry about. And Santa Claus, yes, Santa Claus. We have seen. We have watched the leaked videos of the Apollo mission where the astronaut describes, hey, Houston, we have a problem. There's a Santa Claus there. And we know that Santa Claus is the name for UFO. So who's going to be in charge of? That's what the power struggle is, to my understanding. Who's going to be in charge between these two men of either representing the first civilian contact with extraterrestrials, presenting them, introducing them to the public? Who's going to be in charge of that? It's going to be a military person Or an and, is it who's gonna lead the project about retro-engineering technology and UFO technology? Who's gonna have the ET technology? Because, okay, there's everything we've retro-engineered until now. Now people start to know about it. You have David Grush, who came out to talk about this, and other people. Now it's with the protection law, it's easy to come forward now, and it's going to be more and more interesting, more and more people. But then there's this. But, the disclosure is moving forward. Now the extraterrestrials plan to reveal themselves publicly, because they've been working with the government since a good while. The governments know a lot about them. They're working together. There's the Earth Alliance. They go to meeting in space. You have all the people walking among us, etc., etc. So who's going to take in the technology now that these ETs are going to openly give us? Because at the moment, they make first contact, civilian contact, public contact. It's official that they're on TV, they're in the streets, they're everywhere, the ships are coming. We step into a new era where we're about to join the Galactic Federation of Worlds for protection and for exchange of technologies. Once you are a member of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, you get to exchange technology freely. You share, you put the knowledge and the technology in common. So who's going to have the leadership of getting these ET technologies implemented? That's power. So I think there's this behind as well. But that's my vision, my own personal analysis with what I see, what I know. I try to make an understanding of it. So I'd be interested to know about your understanding of it.
Yeah, I think it's a power struggle. I think Space Command is kind of relatively new in terms of authority in the US military system. It only was formed in 2019, reconstituted in 2019. It previously existed from 1982 up until 2002, and then it was disbanded, and it just became a subordinate command within the US Air Force. But it was reconstituted as one of the kind of combatant commands in the US military system, which means that it is responsible for organizing the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Space Force assets that deal with space. Anything above 60 miles in the atmosphere is all under the domain of space, is considered space. So Space Command is in charge of all of that in terms of operations. So that creates conflict with NORAD, which is responsible for defense of North America, because how do you deal with UFOs that, sure, they can be in the atmosphere, appear in the atmosphere, but they come from space? So who has jurisdiction? Is it NORAD? Is it Space Command? So there's a battle, but I think, if you look at it logically, it's like, well, because these objects come from deep space and they're over our skies, it's Space Force, Space Force is part of it, but Space Command has to have ultimate jurisdiction because they're responsible for tracking them and interdicting them if necessary. So I think that's the struggle.
Yeah.
That's the struggle.
Yeah.
But you mentioned David Grush, and I think I'd like to finish up with a final question, and for now, and just get your response on this. Now, some people believe that David Grush is part of a psyop to condition the American public and the world for a alien false flag event, and that he's putting out this narrative that we don't know what these are, that there's a kind of fear factor or there's a national security threat. Others believe, and I've tended to kind of go with this theory, that it's a limited hangout, that they're putting out some of the truth, that there's alien craft that are being reverse engineered, but corporations have been studying these for decades and have made very little progress, that they haven't had any major breakthroughs at all. So, yeah, that we've got alien spacecraft, but the corporations are studying them and they're just too advanced. We don't know what they are, but they're kind of there. So the things that are flying out there, that they're not our stuff. So I think that's the limited hangout. And then there's the genuine disclosure. I think maybe this could be part of what the Earth Alliance and Space Command and the Galactic Federation are doing, is like they're using people like David Grush to like prepare us for genuine disclosure, that we're going to have all of the technology that's been suppressed released soon, and that's so that we're going to have a very positive future. So which way do you go in these different explanations for people like David Grush and other whistleblowers coming forward?
Well, I straightly tell you I go for the last and third version, because for many reasons. I've been told that this final update of this disclosure plan is very clever and will surprise everyone, and it's very cleverly done. Thorhan said to me, "This is genius." That's this. So I wait always to make a judgment of what I see in this story, but also because what's important now, it's to take it step by step to the public. ETs are real. That's the first step. And that's a big thing. ETs are real and they have been here for a long time and have worked with our governments. And that's the first tough part. And this is happening whether some people like Stephen Greer will say all the ETs are positive, whether someone like David Grush will say all the ETs are a threat, they are negative. I would say doesn't matter for the moment. What matters is that these different narratives blend in with the different current of thoughts, and it just goes through. It goes through the gate to the people's mind. Whatever they think about aliens, it goes through their mind and they realize, wow, aliens exist, it's real. They've been here and they've worked with our governments. Oh, wow. But then, once the mentalities of the collective unconscious of humanity has realized that and it's assimilated, then we can pass to the next step, contact. But I think that, if the truth was said straight away about the retro-engineered technology, what does this imply? To disclose all the top secret stories. Because what does it imply? Oh, so we have retro-engineered this technology. It works very well. We've built TR3Bs, we've built even more. We have Solar Warden. And that's a shock. And there is so much more that I personally don't know about these top secret programs, that I think if they were revealed now, it would cause a bit of chaos, and especially for the military, because they don't want us to know that they've been working on technologies that have not been always ethical with humanity. You know what I mean? So saying that technologies, retro-engineered technologies, it hasn't worked, I think it's false. It has worked. We have even implied, in everyday's work with the fiber optics or super materials, we have so much from it. What I want to say else? So that's the work with retro-engineering technology. That's the work with the good ETs. They've given us technology, but it hasn't really worked. That means we're not going to tell you now yet about our secret space program and stuff. Not yet. It's too much, and we need to clean up our house before we open it to the public. But then also, the narrative, there isn't any any regressive extraterrestrials, they are good. Of course, to me it's absurd. Why would we have the monopoly of evil, on this planet? It's ridiculous. It's everywhere. It's because also if the governments disclose that they've been working with the Orion Greys, for instance, or the Sika Reptilians, well, they're gonna get to tell people what they've done with these ETs. The abductions, the Montauk, the MILABs, military abductions, they're gonna, the harm that they've done humanity, that they've sold out, the Majestic 12 has sold out humanity to the Orion Greys. They're gonna have to say that, and they don't want to. So as long as the deep state is in power, they won't go there, saying that, oh, there are regressive aliens. We have worked with them. Oh, no, they're not going to say that yet. That's not them to say that. That's other people who are protected, I suppose, will come forward. So that's my view on it, and I always keep in mind what Thoran said to me. This plan is genius, and you will be surprised until the end, to the end. So I think David Grush knows more than he revealed, and he cannot reveal everything because behind him there are, I think, entities, or military entities who forbade him or to say things, or he may have signed NDAs, I don't know. But it's just a start, What's important is that humanity realizes that they are not alone in the universe. ETs are real, and they have been here, and they are here. So that's, to me, what matters. And I personally have very strong reasons to believe there will not be an alien invasion scenario. It was planned. It was a real thing. They've prepared. The deep state has prepared all the holographic technologies, has prepared to use false aliens and ships that they've retro-engineered to make believe it's alien invasion. But how things are now, it won't happen. I believe it won't happen because the exopolitical scene on Earth has changed.
So do you still feel confident that 2023 is going to be the watershed year? It's going to be the one where we step into this kind of post-disclosure world, and all the things in the past will be revealed and will eventually be kind of like forgotten, or like hard to believe that we actually lived through that. So you still feel optimistic about what's ahead in the next 6 months to a year?
I still feel optimistic. Now there's a lot of interference. Will it happen everything in 2023? I think it has started, and it's taking the time it needs, but I think 2023 and 2024, personally, I see the speed, slow speed it's taking, and I would say it has started. 2023 is the year of disclosure, but to know the whole of it, maybe it will take another year to spread it throughout time. That's what I think.
Yeah, well, certainly the whistleblower protection laws that are in effect, and new congressional legislation being put forth in the Intelligence Authorization Act for 2024, where companies are obliged to reveal any projects that deal with extraterrestrial life or reverse engineering of captured technologies. That to me is like, well, that's really putting pressure on the corporations, because that Congress is saying, look, we know you're doing this, we know you've achieved breakthroughs, so if you don't tell us, we're going to cut your funding. So to me, that's very powerful. And so they have 6 months from when that legislation is passed to when that goes into effect. So certainly I think in the middle of 2024, when that legislation goes into effect, I imagine there'll be a lot of corporations that are feeling the pressure to reveal everything that's going on, and of course the whistleblowers. So where do people go, Elena, to find out about you and your current projects? What do you have planned in the next few months?
Well, thank you. Well, to know all about me, it's elenadanaan.org. It's my website, and you have access to my books and all the rest. I'm always writing books, so but this was going to be a surprise. Well, I'm writing many books at the time, so you will see. I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I put everything for free in there. There's a lot of videos with all my updates. And if you want to know the behind the scenes, my anecdotes when meeting with Ia, for instance, or with Torhan, what's happening in the everyday lives on the Excelsior or other things, I do webinars and Q&As. So it's a Q&A webinar once a month. You have everything. You find that on my website. So Crowdcast. So that's good fun. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, thank you, Elena. You're doing great work. You're really giving people the latest contemporary information concerning not only extraterrestrials, but also major space organizations like Space Command and even NORAD and Northern Command. That's very important. So I want to thank you for being on Exopolitics today and for your service.
Thank you, Mike.
You have been listening to Exopolitics today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.